Picture this: a courtroom full of lawyers in expensive suits. My own brother sitting across from me, smirking like he'd already won. And a judge who looked at me like I was nothing. My brother pointed his finger at me and said, "Your Honor, she can't even pay her own bills."
The room laughed.
Even the judge smiled. Nobody in that courtroom knew who I really was. Nobody knew that in exactly 90 seconds, that same judge's smile would vanish completely. This is the story of how my own family tried to erase me from a $36 million inheritance, and how 3 simple words turned their victory into their worst nightmare. My name is Sarah Whitfield, and for most of my life, I was the daughter nobody talked about at family dinners. My father built a shipping empire from nothing. He started with 1 truck and ended up with a company worth over $36 million. My older brother, Daniel, was always the golden child. He wore tailored suits, drove flashy cars, and stood beside our father in every photo.
Me?
I joined the Army the day I turned 18. While Daniel was closing business deals in air-conditioned offices, I was serving overseas, far from home, far from recognition. My father respected my choice, even if he never said it out loud. But Daniel saw it differently. To him, I wasn't building a future. I was throwing my life away on a uniform and a paycheck that could barely cover rent. He told everyone at the family gatherings that I was the disappointment, the one who couldn't hold a real job, the one who would always need someone else to take care of her. I let him believe it. I never corrected him, because the truth was, my life had taken a very different path than anyone imagined. Then my father passed away. It was sudden, quiet, peaceful, but it left behind a storm none of us were ready for. In his will, he divided the company and the estate between me and Daniel equally. 50-50. $18 million each. Daniel could not accept that. He believed the whole empire belonged to him because he was the one who had worked for it, who had shown up, who had proven himself. Within 2 weeks of the funeral, I received a letter from a law firm. Daniel was taking me to court, claiming I was mentally and financially unfit to manage my share of the estate. He said I had no business experience, no stable income, and no real understanding of how to run a company. He wanted the judge to declare me incapable and hand my entire share over to him for safekeeping. I remember reading that letter twice, just to be sure I wasn't misunderstanding it. My own brother wanted to take away everything our father left me, and he was willing to humiliate me in public to do it. The court date arrived faster than I expected. I walked into that room in a plain blazer, no jewelry, no entourage, nothing to suggest I was anyone important. Daniel arrived with 3 lawyers, a stack of documents, and a look of pure confidence. He had built a narrative, and he had built it well. He told the judge that I had spent years overseas doing what he called odd jobs, that I had no property, no savings account he could verify, and no proof of stable income. Then came the line that cut the deepest. He looked directly at me and said, "Your Honor, she can't even pay her own bills. How can she possibly manage a company worth millions?" The courtroom chuckled. Even the judge allowed himself a small, amused smile. He turned to me and said almost mockingly, "She thinks she's qualified to run it?" I felt something rise in my chest. Not embarrassment,
Not shame.
something sharper. Because Daniel had built his entire case on one dangerous assumption. He assumed that because he didn't know what I had become, nobody else in that room did either. I stood up slowly. The room quieted, expecting me to stammer out some kind of defense, some kind of apology. Instead, I looked the judge straight in the eye and said 3 words. "I'm Colonel Whitfield." The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had ever felt on a battlefield. The judge's smile disappeared instantly. His hand, which had been casually resting on his notes, went still. Because in that courtroom, sitting in the front row, was someone else. My commanding officer, General Marcus Hale, who I had personally invited weeks earlier when I first learned about Daniel's lawsuit. He stood, straightened his jacket, and addressed the court. He confirmed my rank, my record, and something Daniel never bothered to research. Over the last 6 years, I hadn't just been serving. I had been leading logistics operations worth hundreds of millions of dollars for the United States military. I managed budgets larger than my father's entire company. I oversaw international supply chains, personnel, and multi-million-dollar contracts. The woman Daniel called financially unfit had spent years managing resources far beyond the scope of our father's business. But here is the part Daniel didn't know. I hadn't just come to defend myself. I had come prepared. Months before the court date, I had already sat down with our father's original financial advisor, the same man who had helped build the company from its first truck. I discovered something Daniel never expected. Our father had left a private letter with his advisor, to be opened only if the will was ever contested in court. In that letter, my father explained that he always suspected Daniel might try something like this. He had seen the ambition in his eyes, the same ambition that made him excellent at making deals, but dangerous when it came to family. My father had prepared a clause. If any heir attempted to legally strip another heir of their inheritance through court manipulation, that heir would automatically forfeit their own share, and it would transfer entirely to the other. My lawyer submitted that letter, along with the notarized clause, directly to the judge. The courtroom that had laughed at me minutes earlier now sat in complete, stunned silence. The judge read the letter twice, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. Daniel's lawyers scrambled to object, claiming the letter needed verification, needed time, needed review. But the notarization was airtight. My father, brilliant until his final days, had anticipated exactly this moment. The judge looked at Daniel, and for the first time in the entire hearing, his voice was firm, almost cold. He explained that Daniel's own lawsuit, the one designed to strip me of my inheritance, had just triggered the very clause meant to protect it. By legally trying to prove me unfit and take my share, Daniel had activated our father's failsafe. The entire $36 million estate was not going to be split. It was not going to go to Daniel. It was going to me. Daniel sat frozen, his face pale, his lawyers whispering frantically beside him, searching for an exit that did not exist. The same courtroom that had smirked at the disappointment, the failure, the woman who couldn't manage her own bills, now watched her walk out with everything. 8. The resolution. I did not gloat. I did not throw his words back in his face, even though every part of me wanted to. Instead, I did something that surprised everyone, including myself. I offered Daniel a choice. He could walk away with nothing, as the law now stated. Or he could keep his original 10% management role in the company, the role he had actually earned through years of real work, but only if he formally apologized, both to me and to our father's memory, for trying to weaponize the court against his own sister. He was silent for a long moment. Then, for the first time since the funeral, I saw something real in his eyes. Not anger.
Shame.
He accepted. Not because he wanted to keep his role, but because in that moment, he finally understood what he had almost lost, not just money, but the last person in his family who was still willing to stand beside him. Looking back, I understand something now that I didn't fully understand before that day in court. Daniel wasn't wrong that I had spent years in a life he didn't recognize. He was wrong to assume that meant I had nothing to offer. Sometimes the people closest to us judge our worth by what they can see, our house, our car, our bank account, without ever asking what we actually carry inside us. My father knew my worth even when he never said it out loud. He didn't leave me an equal share out of guilt or pity. He left it because he trusted me completely, and he protected that trust with everything he had, even after he was gone. If there's one thing I want you to take from this story, it's this. Never let anyone convince you that your value is measured by what they understand about your life. Sometimes the quietest people in the room are carrying the heaviest responsibilities. And sometimes, the moment someone tries to tear you down in public is the exact moment your truth finally gets the chance to stand up. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own strength, your own quiet battles that nobody around you fully understands, let me know in the comments. And if you believe that real worth is never about appearances, share this with someone who needs to hear it today.